So is that from the first question? What's your opinions about Trump's action in response to serious chemical attack?
Yeah, I think probably you and I have a similar view on that. I feel like the U.S. oftentimes gets involved in these conflicts abroad, but maybe without thinking through very carefully the potential consequences. And I think it's true in this case, whereas, I'm not sure if the consequences in the future will be good or bad, and I can certainly understand the impulse to want to intervene in the case of chemical warfare in Syria, but I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do in the end, in terms of how many people in the end could be killed, or what that means for international relations. Yeah, I do think that it would be better if there were an international coalition or an international effort to intervene if that were decided that would be the good thing to do. And I think the decision to intervene should be debated amongst different nations. And then together it would be good to have an international force to go into and intervene if they think that that's the right thing to do. So I don't think it's necessarily good for the U.S. to always intervene, and oftentimes this leads to consequences that are not very good in the future anyway.
Yeah, but you do think the actions to stop the chemical attack in Syria is necessary, right?
My tendency, is to think that that's probably true. And I think, it's hard to decide where the line is, because atrocious things are happening all the time. And it's difficult to decide, okay, where's the line? When do we go in and stop people from doing what they're doing? In our class we read Appia and Cosmopolitanism, right? And Appia talks about, there being a line that, if people cross that line, then we have the right to intervene. That tolerance doesn't mean we just accept everything that other people do. And I think it's really hard to decide where that line is, when it would be good to step in and help.
So as we know, American mainstream media, they all praise Trump's actions about the Syria. Do you think what's the cause of the media support?
I think partially out of desperation, because Trump does not appear presidential at all. And I think at various moments the media wants to say, hey, that's actually presidential. And I think that's, again, one of those moments. I think there was another moment when Trump gave a speech to Congress, and all of a sudden people were saying, oh, now he's presidential. But then he does something totally crazy the next day. So I think it's partially out of that need to make Trump fit the idea of what we think a president should be. And maybe it's partially out of denial that Trump he's not as bad as, he appears to be. And so I think, that might be a reason. And also maybe to try to justify our actions in terms of Syria.
Yes. So do you think despite the media, do you think American people will think it is also a symbol of Trump became more presidential?
I'm not sure. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Hillary Clinton supported that decision. So I think surprisingly there were more people that supported it than as at least I would personally expect. So I think a lot of people may believe that. But in America, of course, a lot of people are still protesting his being the president. And of course, they're not going to buy that.
Yeah. Yes. So another thing is about like Chinese media and American media, like they evaluate this event from totally different perspective, but it's both fact-based though. So how do you think why they were like evaluate from different perspectives?
Can you tell me a little bit more how the Chinese media portrays
Yeah.
the Syria attack?
Yeah, like they of course they state like the fact like how many people get injured in this attack, and they also state like Trump announced his action is for morality, but they actually like at the end of this report they were state like how many people get injured in the Trump's action, like sending 59 missiles. Some soldiers and several civilians get injured or died in this attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they didn't like directly state like it is not proper action, but they just like state this factor following their report.
Yeah.
So I think like and like the many authority comments, like some we have some judge person in society like from some university professors, they all like they analyze Trump's actions like only for like the political profits behind it, or some like some individual profits for Trump because he has some like some affairs about he and the Russian president, and like his action after Syria like kind of like to show he didn't have like individual relationships with the president, because after these actions like the Russians' influence in Syria gets weakened. So they all analyze this event like from this kind of not very moral or not for justice, just for like some profit behind it. So I think it's like a very different way to think this action.
Yeah, and I think probably media in China and media in the US have different motivations.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, probably in the US, the media wants to find some kind of justification for sending the missiles into Syria. Again, maybe finding some reason for Trump to seem more presidential, whereas China doesn't have that need to find the morality of that action because China wasn't responsible for it. But yeah, like we said prior to the interview, of course maybe there's a certain kind of trope or convention that happens when China talks about the US or when the US talks about China. There's a lot of politicians in the US make China out to be like an enemy, like Trump during his campaign would talk about China as like in some ways like an enemy, even though it doesn't really make that much sense. And I'm wondering, maybe that happens to a certain extent in China also, to take a critical attitude towards the actions of the US.
Yes. Do you think it will like influence like the audience or the public thinking?
I feel like oftentimes when people watch the news, like we watch things to reinforce beliefs we already hold. So I feel like to a certain extent, I mean, maybe the media caters to that, to a certain audience. Like in the US, Fox News caters to the very conservative audience and will say things to pander to this audience. Other news networks, do something similar to different audiences. So I feel like, on the one hand, we gain information from watching the news. On the other hand, it's like we have a filter in our brains and we only accept things that we think is true anyway.
So do you think it is possible like media choose certain perspective to like satisfy the audience sometimes?
Can you ask the question again?
Like sometimes maybe like media choose certain perspective like to fit in the audience tastes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
Mm.
I think on TV, the TV news networks, on the radio, there are certainly some characters who say outrageous things, just because they know that that's the kind of thing that their audience wants to hear.
Yeah.
So it's not in search of like, truth, but to satisfy the audience.
Yeah. I think like the audience like Chinese media and American media, they choose different perspectives because of like the differences in ideology.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But do you think it's a good thing like media actually not as objective as we like expected?
Yeah, I don't think that's a good thing. I wish reporters would take a braver stance sometimes to seek out what's true. And maybe some people, some journalists, some reporters do that. But yeah, I would hope that journalists don't just say things because of just to pander to the audience, or just because they're trying to voice what the party line is, but they'll actually seek to find out what's true and to try to I guess give the audience different perspectives. I mean, sometimes it's hard to determine what's true, right?
Yeah.
But if we can, if an event can be portrayed from multiple points of views, then maybe we can get closer to the truth.
Yeah, I think so.